Hello, and welcome to this presentation on turning information into charts and visuals. This presentation is going to go over Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel and the basics of how to use those to make charts and visuals with your data. We'll create a couple simple charts together, and we'll even look at using pivot tables. So quickly, you have a couple tools that you can use to make charts and visuals for your classes. Both are free to you as a student and both have some advantages. Google Sheets auto saves itself, so you never have to worry about saving. It's very easy to collaborate and it's pretty intuitive. If you just got some simple data to work with, I think Google Sheets is a really good way to go. Microsoft Excel is more advanced and has way more features. So if you have more complex data or need to do more complex calculations, you probably want to look at Excel. You also have free access to Microsoft Excel, and the Microsoft Office 365 suites is also you can access online, and it also auto saves just like Google. So we'll look at those in just a second. You also have a couple resources available as a UNLV student that I might recommend if you need help getting your data or turning it into charts or figuring out what type of chart you need. Always feel free to ask your professor because they're really going to be one of the best resources for you on what type of chart you might want to be making or how to get or use your data. But you can also work with the Office of Undergraduate Research, which is available for all UNLV students, and they specifically look at research. And then librarians are also a really great option. If you'd like to meet with the Office of Undergraduate Research, you can go to their website, unlv.edu/OUR for the Office of Undergraduate Research hour. And then you can schedule a research advising appointment. And those can be done online or in person. And then when it comes to librarians, you can find librarians based on subject, or when it comes to librarians, if you go to the UNLV library website, and then to meet with a librarian, you can go to the library's website, library.unlv.edu, and then select meet with a librarian. And you'll see some different options based on who's available and the different subjects that they specialize in. If you're feeling stuck and you've already spoken with your professor, I would recommend one of these two resources as they are very knowledgeable and will definitely be able to help. But let's get into actually making the charts with Google Sheets and Excel. Just a quick note for myself too to remember the details. It's really important that you give your chart a name and titles and look at the assignment specific instructions to see if your professor has any preferences for how you do that, how you name your chart, what axes are called, and where they might lie. If you're not sure, again, just reach out to your professor. They can definitely help you with those details, but sometimes the details really make a difference. So again, that's just more for me to remember to do that as I show you a couple sample data sets and we look at making some charts. So let's get to it. We're going to start out with Google Sheets because again, it is a little more intuitive. I think it's a good starting place. You can get to Google Sheets by going to google.com/sheets. Google Sheets, make sure you're logged in with your student email address. As a student, you have access to Google Workspace, which just has a few additional features. So if you're not already logged in with your student email address, go ahead and select the profile picture icon up here and then add in your Rebel Mail email address. It should prompt you to log in with your ACE ID. And then you can select create a blank spreadsheet, or you might be able to see your past data sets there. I created a few samples to go through for this presentation. These are very simple. Yours will probably be a little bit more involved, or maybe not. So the first thing I always like to do is make sure that I've sorted and formatted everything correctly. You can use the menu up here to make sure everything is formatted the way you'd like it to. And then you can also add filters to your data. This just allows you to more easily sort it if you need. Selecting this funnel icon here in the from the menu will create a filter, and it will create a filter for everything you've highlighted. So now when I select this, it makes the top item a filter, and then I can select that to filter out different options if I don't want them in my data anymore. So that's really important to do just for your own organization. And you can even highlight the whole column by selecting the column number at the top, and then it'll filter out the entire column. So if you add anything, it'll be included in that filter. So now you can see that that test is there. So now let's create a chart. I'm going to link this spreadsheet, by the way, in the YouTube video description. So if you come here, you can select File and make a copy to test this out on your own side if you'd like. So now I'm going to make a chart. I'm just going to highlight the data I need in the chart, and then I'm going to go to Insert Chart. And there it is. It already did it. Now there's a lot of customization options. So I'm going to go over here and kind of go through these real quick. You can select a different type of chart that you would like to use. And then you can change the axes if you would like them to be different. Let's see what happens when I do that. So now it's going to just show the average test score versus this method. In this case, I think method makes more sense. Otherwise, it's a little confusing. But you can switch the rows and columns. You see, when you do that, it kind of makes no sense. So it kind of does clue you into what your axes should be just by playing around. Now, when you go to customize, you can again add, make your chart pretty if you have different ideas about the colors, change the title and the names of the axes. Again, the details really matter. So you see if I update the title there, not saying this is a better title, but it'll just automatically update in the chart. And then another cool thing is if you realize some of your data is wrong, you don't have to remake the chart. You can just update the numbers here and it'll automatically update it for you. Now that I clicked out of it, I've lost the editor. So to get it back, you can just double click on the chart and then you'll see the editor and it'll actually bring up right where you left off. And again, you can make changes. I'm gonna make this chart really, really ugly, but no, maybe it's not that ugly, but a little bit. But just to show you how you can make some different changes. And then the error bar just shows the margin of error. So if your data does have a margin of error, that can be useful. You can also add data labels if you'd like to indicate the different test scores here by number so that it's a little easier to read in this case. And then you can even add a trend line if that would make sense for your data. Now that's impossible to see. That kind of shows the trend of the different scores there. And you can also update the legend so that you can kind of see, so that someone viewing the chart can see what the different colors mean. In this case, there's only one color, but that could be helpful in other cases. And again, you can update the titles of the axes, the formatting of the font here, so I can make it italic or bold. So you can really play with any part of this chart. Now, let's say you realize, oh, I don't want it to look like this anymore. If you do update the chart, it'll take those settings away and you'll have to redo all those settings. So make sure that you have the right chart and your data looks good before you start making those aesthetic changes. Now let's look at the second test. I'm going to do this really quickly. And this is, let's see here, go to insert and then again, chart. So now this chart, I think would make a little more sense as a line chart. So to change it from a column chart to a line chart, forgot my words there for a second, you can just go into setup and then change it up here. And then continue through the customization settings. So hopefully you're able to see that it is pretty straightforward once you get into it. And once you go insert chart, then everything else becomes pretty clear. Before we move on to look at before we move on to look at Excel, I want to show you quickly how to do a pivot table in Google Sheets. Pivot tables may be needed if you have a little bit more data points than might fit into two columns or might fit neatly into one set of bars or one line. So I made up this data. This is not accurate at all based on the amount of pigeons at different parks at different times of day in Las Vegas. And my vision for this is that there would be one line, it would be a line graph, one line for each park. In order to do this, I'll need to make a pivot table because if you're just going to go make a chart, it'll only give me one line. And let me show you what I mean by that. So if I go insert chart, look, it's just going to give me all these different bars. And if I go into line, it's just going to be, this is not helpful at all, in my opinion, for what I want to show. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And instead, I'm going to go insert pivot table. If you're running into a similar issue where you're like, what the heck, this is not how I want it to look, it may be that you need to use a pivot table, which is a lot easier to do than it sounds. I was sort of intimidated by this, but if you just select insert pivot table and then create, now it's helpful to know kind of how you want the chart to look or what you're envisioning. So in this case, the value, because I want to measure the amount of pigeons at different parks at different times of day. So the value is the amount of pigeons because that's really the important part here. The rows is going to be park because I would like each row to be a different park. And then the columns are going to be time of day on the x-axis because I would like to measure that throughout the time of day. So now I've done that and I can just click right in here into the pivot table, go insert and chart again. And now you'll see that it's kind of made it all, it's changed the way the chart looked versus before when I went here and just did it without the pivot table. It just made them all different lines. But I want this to be a line graph. So I'm going to go back into the chart by double clicking it, go into setup, and then select the lines. All right, we got 4 lines for 4 different parks now. Oh, I did this wrong. So this is a great example of how you can fix it when you do it wrong. So I messed this up and instead I need these two things to be swapped. So I need the time of day to be the rows and the park to be the column. So trial and error is always going to be helpful, even if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you'll get there if you just play around with it, just like me. So now I have an extra thing on my legend here, which I don't want because I don't need it. So to fix that, what you're going to want to do is double click into the chart, go to series, double click on this, the legend, just to get access to it in the editor. And then if you go to setup, you'll see that you have all the options of the legend. You can just click on park and then select remove. And there we go. Oh, by trial and error, we get there. So that's the basics of a pivot table. Now let's look at Microsoft Excel. As a UNLV student, you have free access to the entire Microsoft Office 365 suite, and you're more than welcome to download the apps directly onto your computer or your phone, but you can also access them through a website just like the Google Sheets. So in order to do that, I will link this link in the description of this video. You can just follow these, go to this website, and then you'll just log in with your ACE ID like you do for almost everything. So you'll log into ACE, and since I'm already logged in, it should take me straight there. But when you log into your ACE ID just from the ace.unlv.edu, you'll see all the apps that you have access to. And then you'll also see Office 365, so you can select that. Once you log in, you can go to create, and then for me, I have to select more in order to go to the Excel workbook, which will just be labeled workbook. I'm going to create a blank workbook. Now, what I'm going to do in order to get this data over here is I'm going to go file in the Google Sheet and then download, and download as Microsoft Excel. You can always do that, luckily. So if you do need to switch programs, you can do that pretty easily. So open files from this device. And then here we go, my charts and tutorials. We're uploading this. And here it is. Hey, look, they even have my graph in there. That's awesome. So now we're going to look at a couple more of these tests. So again, works pretty similar. The icons look slightly different, but they all do the same thing. So this button here, sort and filter, you can select that and then select filter to add the filters in, and you'll see these little pop down arrows come up. And then you can take out things you don't need if you don't need them. But in this case, you do have to select apply. So just a little different there. And then, yeah, again, if you highlight the whole column, you can just filter the whole column in case you add anything. So now that I've formatted it, I'm gonna go to insert and then charts. And look, it'll even recommend some. So I'll just go ahead and select that. Now, this is sort of helpful, I guess, in describing this data, which is really a budget for how much some hypothetical person might spend every month. But I think what would be better would be a pie chart. So if you just select the pie there, then it'll change it. And then it's kind of nice because all these options are on the top bar here. So you can update the title and the formatting. That's horrible. I don't like that. Of chart and then so again, don't forget the details. That can be really helpful. And then if you double click in there, you should also be able to update them similar to how you did in the Google Sheet, or how we looked at in Google Sheets. Now let's look at another example real quick. Now for me, I kind of tend to be a little bit picky about how things are formatted. So I just want to make sure all my columns are sorted correctly. Another nice feature I like to use in either one of these programs is the text wrap feature. If you just select wrap here, then it'll make all the words show up, even if the columns are too small. Well, don't let me eat my words here, but you can kind of see how it'll move it so that you can see everything. If you unselect wrap, then it'll cut it off. So it's just something I like to do. But all right, let's go ahead and insert a chart here. I'm going to try this one. All right. So I forgot to select course. So there we go. Now it shows up. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Now let's look at the pivot table again. It's pretty similar, but it works just slightly different. So it just looks mostly different. So again, I'm going to come to my data here and I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to highlight my exact data set because if you don't, you're going to have some blank spaces in your chart. I'll show you what I mean really quickly here. So you see there's these blank spaces, but you can't delete them in your pivot tables in Excel. So if I go to put a chart in, it's going to show me this blank space. So I need to update my data set to go from A1 to C17. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the data set over. Oops, you're seeing all my random pivot tables here. So I'm just going to highlight the exact data set. I'm going to go insert pivot table. I'm going to put it on the existing sheet in this case, which means I'm going to have to define where Excel is going to put it. I'll go insert. It's going to give me the options, add in, drag and drop my data sets, or the data that I'd like and how I'd like it to be displayed. And then I'll select the line graph again, and look, there's no blank space. So that's essentially how you would go about making a pivot table in Excel. If you have questions or need help, you're always welcome to reach out to Online Student Support as well. You can reach us at onlinestudents@unlv.edu. More than happy to work with you through a specific issue you're encountering and see what we can do to solve it. So in any case, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful.